successful individuals, the ones, the swiftest runners, the ones with the keenest eyesight, the sharpest claws, the keenest hearing, the most attractive feathers and so on, were the ones that survived and reproduced, and in some way that Darwin didn't know, their qualities, the qualities that helped them to survive, were passed on, and so the species gradually improved. What I did in The Selfish Gene was to take the logical conclusion to that, to say, well, what actually does survive from generation to generation? And the answer is DNA, the answer is genes. It's only the genetic information which is transmitted through the generations, through an indefinitely large number of generations, potentially millions of generations, the same gene can survive. Now that's very important because it means that the difference between a good one and a bad one, a successful one and an unsuccessful one, really matters, because a successful one is still there after millions of years, and an unsuccessful one is not. How are they successful? Well, they're successful by building individual bodies. And the exact nature of the success depends upon the species. In the case of birds, they're good at flying. In the case of moles, they're good at digging. In the case of gibbons, they're good at swinging through the trees. In the case of dolphins, they're good at swimming, and so on. So the details are different. But the essence of what's going on in every species is success in passing on the self-replicating DNA, which makes them successful. Every creature alive is descended from an unbroken line of successful ancestors. Every one of your ancestors succeeded in surviving to adulthood and having at least one heterosexual copulation. That's obvious. much flows from it, because lots and lots and lots of individuals died young, lots and lots and lots of individuals never copulated, never reproduced. We are all the descendants of a progenitorial elite, the minority that were successful in their own time. And they were successful at whatever it was. As I said, swinging through the treetops or swimming in the sea, whatever it might be. The nature of what it took to be successful changes all the time. But what the success really is success in passing on genes. We all contain the genes that made our ancestors successful in becoming ancestors, because that's what success means in biology. Success in being an ancestor. Why Selfish Gene? Because at the time when I wrote it, there was a spate of popular books which were talking about why animals are altruistic, why they cooperate, why they do good to each other, why they feed each other, why they warn each other of danger, why they restrain themselves in fighting. And these books by people like Conrad Lawrence and Robert Ardrey, made the mistake of thinking that natural selection chooses among groups or species. So Conrad Lawrence, for example, thought the reason why animals fight in a restrained and ritual way, rather than going all out for the kill, is that it would be bad for the species if they went all out for the kill. Those species survive in which individuals are restrained, which individuals are altruistic, which individuals cooperate. That's entirely the wrong way to look at it. The right way to look at it is to say those individuals survive and reproduce best if they are, in this case, altruistic, or in this case, restraining themselves in fighting. We've got to find a way in which the selfish gene, because it's ultimately genes that go through the generations for the reasons I've said already, it's ultimately the selfish gene. Genes will be selected if they look after their own interests. But very often the best way for a gene to look after its own interests is to program the bodies that it gets into to be altruistic. So you can think of the individual body, and I put this, that's the phrase I used in The Selfish Gene. The individual body is a survival machine for its genes. The individual body dies, it's cast aside and dies. And the only thing that gets continued on into the next generation is the genes. And very often, altruistic behavior at the individual level is the way that genes survive. So a gene that makes an individual feed its young obviously survives because the copies of the gene are in the offspring. But also a gene that makes an individual feed its younger brothers and sisters may survive because there's a statistical chance which can be calculated that it will be preserved in the body of the brother or sister or the nephew or niece. So I was trying to interpret all of behavior, including altruistic and selfish behavior, in terms of selfish genes.
So it's been 35